The station was breathing, crowds moving in waves, voices colliding, announcements breaking through the air like sudden cracks of thunder. Yet in the middle of all that noise, she stood still. Her fingers clutched the handle of a small, worn suitcase, its leather edges frayed, the brass locks dulled by years of travel. A red scarf, wound loosely around her neck, fluttered each time the doors opened and the autumn wind rushed inside. The scarf was not for warmth. It was a shield, a memory, a wound. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her gaze lingered on the far end of the platform, where a train was pulling in with a scream of iron against iron. People surged forward, impatient and restless, but her eyes were fixed, sharp, unblinking, almost trembling with the weight of what they carried. She searched the faces as they spilled out, one by one, until the blur of strangers became unbearable. Her breath caught. No one else noticed. Why would they? To them, she was just another traveler, a quiet girl waiting for something, or perhaps for nothing at all. But her silence was loud. It pressed against the air, heavier than the clamor around her. Her hand shook slightly, and she pressed it flat against the suitcase to steady herself. The cool leather beneath her palm reminded her she was here, alive, standing on ground she once swore she would never return to. She felt the wind sweep her hair across her face, strands sticking to the corners of her lips, but she did not brush them away. Let the world be messy. Let it try to cover her eyes. Her silence would cut deeper than words. Somewhere in the noise, a child's laughter broke through, a sound too pure for this place. For a fleeting moment, her eyes softened, her lips almost parting as if to whisper something long buried. But then, as quickly as it came, the softness vanished. She pulled the scarf tighter. The cracked watch on her wrist ticked unevenly, like a stubborn heart refusing to give in. She tilted it slightly, catching the dim yellow glow of the overhead lights against the fractured glass. The hands pointed forward, yet the broken surface reminded her of everything that had already shattered. Her silence stretched, weaving itself into the chaos of the station. She did not step forward. She did not retreat. She simply stood there, waiting, her presence both invisible and undeniable. And then her eyes locked. A face. Familiar. Unwanted. The kind of recognition that steals your breath before you can decide what to do with it. The scarf trembled against her chest as the wind rushed in again. She did not speak. She only watched, and the silence grew louder. The train's brakes hissed, a long metallic sigh that spread across the platform. She did not move, but her eyes wavered, drawn, then retreating, like tides that could not decide which shore to claim. The scarf clung to her throat, the suitcase pressed against her leg, grounding her as much as it weighed her down. A sound, metal wheels striking, pulled a memory forward. Her father's voice, low and weary, the way it used to fill their small kitchen. You carry your whole life in a bag, Era. Never let anyone decide what belongs inside. She had been 10 when he said it, watching him fasten the same brass locks on the suitcase. Back then, the bag had been too big for her to carry. Now, it seemed almost too small for everything it held. The fragments of silence, the weight of unsent letters, the clothes she packed without care, and the one scarf she couldn't leave behind. Era blinked, pulled back into the present. Around her, the station swelled with reunion, arms wrapping around waists, hurried kisses, laughter rushing against the cold air. A woman dropped her bags to scoop up a child running toward her. A young man held flowers out awkwardly, cheeks red with nerves and hope. She watched, not with envy, but with a kind of hollow ache. That space where joy should have been was crowded instead with memory and questions. The cracked watch ticked against her wrist, each uneven, second a reminder of promises broken by time itself. She clenched her hand until the glass pressed into her skin. That was when she felt it, a gaze. Not the hurried glance of strangers, not the indifferent stares people give when they're simply passing through. This one lingered, measured, intentional. She turned her head slowly. There, standing among the crowd, but not a part of it. His posture almost still, as if movement itself would betray too much. His eyes were fixed on her, not searching, not surprised, just present, like he had been waiting all along. She felt her chest tighten, though she told herself not to. She had prepared for this moment, or so she thought. But preparation, did not steady the tremor in her hands or the way her breath slipped unsteady from her lips. Her scarf shifted again with the cold wind, brushing her jawline like a question. Was it fate that brought her back to the station, this platform, or was it her own weakness, her need to see with her own eyes what silence had built in her absence? The train doors hissed closed. The conductor's voice boomed, announcing the next departure. The crowd moved, thinned, dissolved. But neither of them stepped forward. For the first time in years, her lips parted, not for words, but for air she suddenly couldn't find. And when she almost turned away, she caught it. His faint, confused smile, the kind that breaks and heals in the same breath. She froze. The sky outside the station cracked open, a low growl of thunder rolling across the city. Rain pressed against the glass panes above, soft at first, then harder, like fists trying to break through. The air thickened with the smell of metal and damp stone. People rushed toward exits, coats lifted over heads, voices raised in complaint. But she stayed, and so did he. Era's eyes flicked once more toward the stranger, tracing the details she hadn't let herself see before. His shoes, scuffed, edges lifting, soles almost worn thin. His coat, creased and frayed, one button missing near the collar. And when he shifted, pulling something from his pocket, the sight startled her, a photograph, edges curled from being touched too often. He slid it back quickly, almost guiltily, but not before she caught the glint of it. Two faces, one of them his younger, and the other a girl she couldn't place. Something tightened in her throat. Her suitcase strap dug into her palm, grounding her, but her mind was already drifting into the places she swore she wouldn't go. She thought of her own nights counting coins under a flickering bulb, deciding between bread and bus fare. She remembered tracing cracks in her ceiling as if they were maps to freedom, promising herself she would leave before silence swallowed her completely. And now, standing here watching him, she saw it, that same hunger for escape mirrored in his stillness. The scarf shifted against her skin, dampened by the mist sneaking through the open doors. She pulled it tighter, as though it could shield her from recognition, not of him, but of herself in him. She should walk away. She had rehearsed it. Step back, turn, vanish into the crowd. Yet her feet betrayed her, rooted in hesitation. Each second stretched long, carrying the weight of unasked questions. Why was he here? Why now? And why did his silence sound so much like her own? A flash of lightning threw shadows across his face, revealing lines of exhaustion carved deeper than years should allow. He didn't move toward her, but neither did he retreat. His eyes spoke without words. I see you. I remember. The station grew thinner, emptier, echoing with the rhythm of rain against steel. Her watch ticked, off-beat, fractured. The thunder swelled, drowning announcements, drowning thought itself. She turned slightly, testing herself, the edge of departure just a step away. But when she felt his gaze follow, not pulling, not demanding, just waiting, something inside her faltered. This could be fate. This could be another trap. Both tasted the same on her tongue. Her lips parted, a word almost forming. But the storm answered first. The rain had turned the station floor into a patchwork of reflections, lights bending, footsteps smearing across slick tiles. The air smelled of damp coats, metal, and something rawer, hesitation. Era's hand clenched around the suitcase handle until her knuckles whitened. She was ready to walk, to disappear into the blur of strangers, to let silence keep its crown. But then, one last look betrayed her. She turned, just slightly, enough to catch him again. And in that sliver of a glance, her strength frayed. He was holding something in his hand, something she knew by instinct before her eyes confirmed it. The scarf. Her breath stilled. The same red scarf she had tied hours ago now dangled from his fingers, rain dripping from its edge. It must have slipped from her neck when she loosened it earlier, yet here it was, rescued, cradled, held as if it were more than fabric. Her chest burned. That scarf wasn't just hers. It had been her mother's, the last thing she had left before the silence between them grew eternal. Era had sworn never to lose it, and now it was in his hands. He didn't move closer. He only lifted his gaze, steady, quiet, offering it without words. Her knees almost buckled. She pressed the suitcase tighter against herself, as if holding back a collapse no one else could see. Somewhere nearby, a woman whispered to her companion, "Look at her, poor thing, can't even take what's hers." The word sliced, though the woman hadn't meant cruelty, only judgment dressed as pity. Era wanted to shout, to reclaim not just the scarf but every piece of her life scattered in silence. Instead, her lips trembled and nothing came. She took a step forward, stopped. Another step, stopped again. The scarf swayed in his grip, catching the glow of the flickering overhead light. Some people carry more than just bags, she thought, her mind echoing in the hush between thunderclaps. They carry silence. They carry the weight of everything unsaid. Her cracked watch ticked louder than the storm outside. Every beat mocked her indecision. He finally spoke, voice low, almost breaking. "You dropped this." 2 words. Nothing more. Yet the sound of them nearly undid her. The scarf trembled in his hand, or maybe it was hers that trembled as she reached for it. Their fingers brushed, skin cold against skin, silence against silence. Around them, footsteps hurried, eyes lingered. Some watched with curiosity, others with judgment. But no one understood. No one could. She pulled the scarf back to her chest. Her heart thudded like the storm hammering the roof. And still no decision, no escape. Her silence was intact. His silence unbroken. The moment lingered, fragile, suspended between leaving and staying, between past and something unnamed. And it did not end. The scarf was still pressed against her chest when the announcement rang overhead. Final boarding. Train 9 departing. The platform stirred with urgency, yet Era stood frozen in the eye of her own storm. He hadn't chased her. He hadn't begged. He had only returned what was hers. But it was the way he held it, gentle, almost reverent, that unsettled her. As if the scarf belonged to a history larger than her own. Then she saw it. When his hand fell back to his side, the photograph slipped once more from his coat pocket. This time, it landed face up on the wet tile. She bent instinctively, fingertips brushing its worn surface before he could retrieve it. Her heart clenched. The girl in the photo, the one she couldn't place earlier, wore her scarf. The same red scarf, wound around a neck smaller, softer long ago. The photo was old, the edges faded, but the truth screamed through the blur. It had been his daughter's before it was hers. The scarf pulsed in her grip, suddenly heavier, suddenly unbearable. His silence was no longer simple. It was a wound, a tether, a bridge between 2 griefs she hadn't known were bound. Her father's words cut through her like glass. "You carry your whole life in a bag, Era. Never let anyone decide what belongs inside." Back then, she thought he meant freedom. Now the echo twisted. Perhaps it meant inheritance, the silent burdens passed down, the objects we mistake for our own when they belong to someone else's sorrow. She staggered back a step, almost choking on air. He said nothing, but his eyes, tired, desperate, unbearably human, pleaded with a weight she couldn't ignore. The rain pressed harder against the station roof, a drumbeat that felt like a countdown. She imagined turning away, boarding the train, disappearing again. But the truth had already struck. There was no return to the life she had before this moment. Because now she knew. He wasn't just the stranger she feared, or the memory she wanted buried. He was more. In the silence between them, she caught sight of the newspaper clutched under a commuter's arm. The headline screamed through the blur of motion. CEO returns after tragedy, Malik Raymond to oversee expansion. Her stomach dropped. She had just applied for a job at his company. The one she had convinced herself was her escape route, her chance at rebuilding. And here he was, the man whose silence matched hers, whose loss mirrored hers, whose power now controlled the door she was desperate to walk through. The scarf slipped slightly in her trembling hand. The cracked watch ticked, mocking, echoing, inevitable. She inhaled sharply, lifted her chin, and stepped forward, not onto the train, not toward the exit, but into the waiting room of his silence. And nothing would be the same. The storm had not eased. Rain cascaded down the station's glass roof, drumming like 1,000 restless hearts. The platform, once crowded, was nearly deserted now. Only echoes remained, footsteps fading, muffled voices retreating. Yet Era stood in the same place where she had begun, the suitcase heavy against her side, the scarf trembling in her hands. It was the beginning all over again. But this time, she wasn't the silent girl waiting in the shadows. She was the one being seen. Malik stepped closer, slow, deliberate, each movement weighed by years unspoken. His eyes flicked to the scarf, then back to her. He didn't need to explain. She already knew. It had once belonged to his daughter, now gone. The scarf wasn't hers at all. She had carried someone else's silence without knowing. "You kept it safe," he said softly. His voice cracked, not from weakness but from remembering too much. "For her." Era shook her head, tears threatening though she fought them. "I kept it for me." The words cut through the air like glass, but they were honest, stripped of pretense. The scarf was both, his past, her anchor. And perhaps that was the cruel truth. They had been carrying the same wound from different ends of the thread. Her suitcase slipped from her grasp and landed with a dull thud on the wet tiles. The sound startled her, as if reminding her she could still walk away. But her feet did not move. She met his gaze and, for the first time, did not look away. "Why me?" she whispered, her voice trembling yet steady enough to matter. His silence stretched long before breaking. "Because you remind me of her. Not in the way you look, but in the way you endure. The way you stand in the middle of a storm and refuse to bend." Her heart splintered at the confession. He hadn't chosen her. He had chosen memory. She wasn't being seen. She was being mirrored. For a moment, she almost hated him for it. Almost. She lifted the scarf slowly, her fingers brushing over its frayed edges one last time. Then, with a breath that felt like surrender and rebirth entwined, she placed it back in his hands. Her silence became an offering, not revenge but release. Around them, the station lights flickered, shadows stretching across steel beams. Somewhere, a train roared into motion, pulling away, carrying choices she no longer needed to chase. Her cracked watch ticked against her wrist. Offbeat. Imperfect. Alive. Era bent, lifted her suitcase, and turned toward the exit. No words of promise, no backward glance. Only the echo of what had been returned. Behind her, Malik stood clutching the scarf to his chest, his shoulders shaking once, then still. His silence was no longer waiting, it was mourning. And hers was no longer revenge, it was freedom. As she stepped out into the storm, the city swallowing her, the thought whispered like a scar across her heart. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. The storm had thinned by dawn. The city streets glistened, puddles reflecting a fractured sky that was slowly clearing. Era walked through it alone, the suitcase rolling softly behind her, its wheels catching on broken pavement. The weight of it felt different now, less like a burden, more like proof she had survived carrying it this far. Her hair clung damp against her face, but she didn't rush to brush it away. She let the wind do the work. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what silence might echo back at her. When she reached her small apartment, she set the suitcase in the corner. The cracked watch ticked unevenly on her wrist as she undid the locks, but this time she didn't feel mocked by its rhythm. She placed it gently on the table beneath the window, where the first pale strands of sunlight caught its broken glass and turned it almost beautiful. The scarf wasn't there. She had given it away, and in its absence, she discovered something startling. She felt lighter. Not empty, lighter. The silence that once bound her had been placed back into the hands of the one who needed to carry it. Her room was quiet, but no longer suffocating. She moved through it slowly, opening the drawer of her desk, slipping a folded scrap of paper inside. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't even words, just a page torn from an old notebook where she had once written. Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition. She closed the drawer softly, as if sealing a truth she no longer needed to read every day. Outside her window, the street began to stir. Vendors set up their stalls. A child ran past, laughing, chasing a balloon that had escaped his grip. The sound reached her, warm and unfiltered. For a moment, her chest ached, but then the ache loosened, like a knot finally giving way. She leaned her forehead against the cool glass. Somewhere in the city, Malik would be clutching the scarf, weaving his silence into it, maybe even finding a way to heal. That wasn't her story to finish. Her story was this: choosing to walk away without breaking, choosing to live without carrying what was never hers to bear. She exhaled steady. The morning light touched her face, and for the first time, she let herself believe she had stepped into something new. And yet, one question lingered, sharp as the tick of her broken watch. Do we ever truly leave the people who teach us silence, or do we simply learn to carry it differently?